Hi, everybody. Today is Monday, September 29, 2025, and our friend Larry Johnson is joining us. Welcome, Larry.
Hi there. I had good effort on the shirt there, man. Nice try.
Ah, you're shining, Larry.
Uh,
Beautiful
we'll
shirt.
we'll call it
Let's confess that.
the sunglasses factor. You know, we use the shirts not as a way of disrespect, but the news around the world is so damn grim. We got to have something to smile about.
Yeah, exactly. Larry, let's start with the case of Charlie Kirk. I
Yeah.
don't know if you saw, there is a video in which Jimmy Dore is talking about a new video that came out that's saying that one of his bodyguards using a palm pistol shot him. Here
Yeah.
is the video before going to your comment, because many of our audience are following the situation with the Charlie Kelps case. Here is what we see in this video.
Great. Gang violence. Great. Gang violence. Great.
Yeah, it's your take on what's going on. Many conspiracy theories out there talking
Well,
about the situation. Go ahead.
well, in particular, I think Jimmy Dore's claiming, or he's spreading the this analysis that's put out by someone who claimed that there was a microphone attached to Charlie's shirt, and that one of his bodyguards detonated that, and that's what caused the hole on this side of the neck. Now, apart from the fact that the physics, if it was shot from here and went up, where's the hole on this side? You don't see that. Number one. Um, it, 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 have you ever shot a handgun?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. When you shot it, the bullet
Have
explodes, or the shell casing, they hit the primer, it explodes, the bullet goes forward. What happens to the gun? Does the gun remain still? Does the gun jump forward? Or does the gun come back at you? Yeah, it comes back. Uh, I was,
yeah.
supervising a shooting activity once, and they got this, handheld shotgun. And this woman, I looked up, and she's getting ready to shoot it, and she had it right up in front. She pressed the trigger. That gun butt came back and busted her in the mouth. Okay,
It
so what
can
is it?
hurt. It can hurt the shoulder.
Yeah. So what does this have to do with this little microphone? Well, I tell you what, if that thing is firing any kind of projectile, if it's firing this direction, which way is that microphone going to move? It's going to
Mm,
move this way, right?
yeah.
But in the video, it doesn't. It goes like this.
Mhm.
So, I think it's just, uh, I don't know if that is a deliberate deception, or it's just somebody with too much time on their hands that doesn't understand firearms and explosives. Uh, the only thing we know for sure, and that video, you know, sh- you could hear it. There was a loud gunshot, and when that shot goes off, Charlie Kirk's body reacts in a very specific way. That initially his head, neck goes down, and shirt comes up. What you can see when you slow down the video, so it's like a 3-second, 3.5-second video. There are, my understanding is, there are 30 frames per second.
Mm.
So when you go by frame, right after Charlie, like immediately after he's hit in the neck, you see him come down and his neck expands.
Mm.
Like there's been an explosion inside his body. Well, not like, there was an explosion inside his body. And that the what they call the cavitation from the show. Well, you're an engineer, you know what
Yeah.
cavitation is.
Mm.
Uh, Explain to your listeners what cavitation is, doctor.
Yeah, just something just in displacing a part of body, but by the pressure that it comes into the body and just expanding the body in some
Yeah,
sort of
good.
abnormal way.
Okay, good. I'm glad to see we didn't waste our money on your STEM education. Okay. But clearly his neck expands and then it contracts. And what is it? It comes back in. And as it does, then you get this massive flow of blood. It's like you turn on a beer keg or a tap of water, it just floods out. Well, that's not how if you sever an artery and the heart is still beating, blood spurts out like with every beat of the heart. In this case, what we saw was no artillery blood, even though where the bullet entered is right where the carotid is. So what we know factually is somehow whatever bullet went into his body and with the cavitation effect essentially stopped the heart, destroyed the heart, and it was all literally in fractions of a second. It wasn't, drawn out over 2 or 3 seconds. So what we know is that there was a gunshot. We know that he suffered a bullet wound to the neck. We know that that bullet wound was not accompanied by arterial blood. And we know, if you just go onto YouTube, look up 30-06, that even though the FBI claims that Tyler Robinson was the shooter and he used a 30-06, the wound that killed Charlie Kirk was not a 30-06 round. That's what that's what we know for sure now. Now, the movements of the bodyguards, I can come up with other explanations. They've got one where one of them's jumping over the table and there's a handoff of something. Well, they picked something up off of Charlie and handed it to the other. That could be standard protocol. What catches my attention in all of this is, let's call it the poison well. You poison the well with all these different accounts that just don't add up, but they get people distracted and nobody's demanding answers. I had heard the claim that the Ukrainians had put Charlie on their death list, the Myrtovets list. I checked that out last night. That's not true. So that has been, disinformation that has been spread. So the only story we get from the FBI just about Tyler Robinson just doesn't add up. And is it possible that Tyler Robinson was a patsy? Somebody, he was told, hey, we want you to take your grandpa's rifle. We want you to go up on the building. And, they gave him a location. I want you to be there. And then when you hear the shot, man, you get up and haul ass and get out of there. I think that's more likely what happened, because he did not fire the shot that killed Charlie. That rifle did not do it. There is video after video of guys shooting at 140 yards, same distance as Tyler, with a 30-06 round. And it destroys. It literally destroys everything, tears it apart. That's not what we saw. We saw something very different.
Larry, but how about the distance? Do you think that the shooter, those guys who shoot, he was close to Charlie Kirk?
Yeah,
He was
well,
far
100
away, and can we?
Yeah, they're saying, Tyler's at 140 yards. The way a palm pistol works, it doesn't create the noise that we heard there on that tape.
Mhm.
It's a much lower noise. It's a different kind of noise. You can hear in the way that sound, it had a Doppler effect. In other words, what you'd get with an object traveling at a high rate of speed over some distance. There are other locations up on the roofs that have not been examined that I think were more likely spots for a shooter. But again, the palm pistol from the security guys, you also had the problem with aiming. So um, if anybody that's ever shot a handgun, uh, and if you're just doing what they call point shooting, you point at something and press the trigger. Once you get outside of 5 yards, let's say 7 yards, 21 feet, you're like your accuracy just go, goes away. You have to use either the front sights or an optic. We've got no evidence that was going on with this. So again, I think you have to step back and say, why are these different stories being spread and sort of fed into the narrative? That right there tells me this was an organized attempt. This was an organized plot to kill Charlie Kirk.
Is it that so strange that the Trump administration somehow is wrapping up the whole thing, that they don't want to much talk about it? And even Charlie Kirk's wife came out at the ceremony, at the commemoration, said that she forgives the shooter, that it was supposed to be, in her mind, Tyler.
Well, yeah, I mean, she hasn't had time to think this through logically yet.
Mm.
I think over the next week or two, if she starts stepping back and say, okay, what do we really know? She'll realize that the government's lying to her. And, the FBI actually does not have the lead on this. There's no evidence yet that this was a federal crime. So this is left up to this local police department, who is demonstrating enormous incompetence. And there's the video out by Chris Martinson that, and I know some people have problems with him, but just watch the video, and I think he makes a very compelling case to show that the direction that the shot most likely came from, and certainly to establish that it was not a 30-06. So if I'll make this prediction now. If Tyler Robinson lives, doesn't commit suicide, the Jeffrey Epstein method, and goes to trial, he'll get off. He will not be convicted. The evidence that has been submitted is clearly been tampered with. One of the things Chris Martinson shows, that video where you can see the individual running across the roof and getting to the edge and jumping down. As you watch the video, he slows it down. You see this figure running, and you can see the shadow in front of him. And then all of a sudden, he hits a different part of the roof, and the shadow goes away. Boom. You go, where'd the shadow go? And then in that same video frame, down on the ground in the background, you can see people walking. And they walk, and this guy walks behind a tree and then disappears. And you go, wait a second. The video that they're showing is an edited video. And you got to step back and say, okay, why are they doing that? Why were they so quick to build this narrative? Which they did.
Do you think that it's going to be one of the mysteries of our time, like JFK, or are we going to find out finally, is there anybody in CIA, whistleblower and something like that, to come out? And
Yeah. Well,
what's your take on that?
Yeah. And I'm fascinated by the language you use, because again, it reflects, what is accomplished, the mystery of JFK. It was no mystery. Okay. I mean, the reality, if you step back and really examine the facts, that, what we now know, that Lee Harvey Oswald was a CIA asset who had been recruited into a program set up by James Jesus Angleton, and that took military guys, enlisted personnel, had them get out of the Army, Marine Corps, Navy for whatever reason, and then defect to the then Soviet Union to see if they could somehow become intelligence assets. He was part of that program. The shot that killed Kennedy, the headshot, was not fired by Lee Harvey Oswald. We also know that the Kennedy administration was pushing to stop Israel's development of an atomic weapon, that James Jesus Angleton was working closely with the Israelis in helping them acquire a nuclear weapon. So right away, you had this the CIA officer working against this president. We know that the Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy was requiring it to send a demand letter to what was, I guess, then the Zionist Organization of America, that they register as a foreign agent. So once JFK was dead, that went away. So there's a strong circumstantial case that links CIA, Israeli intelligence, and organized crime. It's not like they were in three separate cones. They're actually they had a lot of overlap. So that's what I say, not a mystery. But more to your point about Charlie, I think something as nefarious as what went on with JFK is happening, because again, the story as presented does not add up. The claim that he was shot and killed by Tyler Robinson's grandpa's 30-06, sorry, doesn't even begin to pass the sniff test.
I think we have to know about the mental health of Tyler Robinson, because you mentioned he can defend himself, but how about we don't know about his mental situation and his mental state? Is he, I don't know, is he able to defend himself, or he's somehow he would, I don't know, they would force him, or they would convince him to accept that he shot the bullet, may that shooting hit him. I don't know how they can manipulate his mindset.
Well, look, reportedly, he has not confessed to anything.
Mm.
And if he goes into court today to enter a plea, he does have now some representation. I don't know if it's public defender or if his folks went out and hired a good defense lawyer. But it also goes back to the question of why was he targeted? You know, why was he selected to be, you know, the patsy for this? I find it difficult to believe this was just about some guy upset at Charlie Kirk over his stance that men are men, women are women, and there's no in between. You know, that's going to get you so angry that you're going to kill somebody. You know, I'm not buying that. So we'll see. But I guess he is supposed to appear before the judge today, and if he enters a plea or not. But again, if a defense attorney, all they have to do is raise doubts, then by God, the amount of you can raise doubts is easily. Show video after video with the 30-06 to show that, you know, this is not the wound that caused Charlie's death.
Did you see the guy who's going to replace, or he's going to be, you know, occupying Charlie's position? He's
No.
in 19 years old, and he's somehow one of his tweets that I saw, he was somehow one of the, in my opinion, he's totally connected with Ben Shapiro, that sort of mindset. He's totally pro-Israel, and
yeah, that's yeah. If they end up putting that kind of person in charge, then that sort of points to who had a motive to get rid of Charlie. That you know, again, let's deal with what we know factually is that there were, in Charlie's own words to Megyn Kelly, in what Tucker Carlson has said based on his conversations with Charlie Kirk, what Megyn Kelly has said, what Candace Owens has said. So it's not just one person making. There's a large number of people that this group of Zionist billionaires put enormous pressure on Charlie to stop featuring people like Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, Dave Smith at these Turning Point USA events, because they were sincere about being America first and not Israel first. And it was creating a real political problem for the Zionists. So those who suggest that could this have been, could there have been a Zionist hand in this? I couldn't argue with them and say, no, that's silly, that's ludicrous. We already have a history. Hell, Netanyahu is bragging about at the UN about all the people they've killed. With Hassan Nasrallah and Hania, the former prime minister or the former president of the Palestinians, who was the lead Hamas negotiator. So Israel can't go around bragging about all the people it's assassinated with and claim, oh, we had nothing to do with this.
They're having a lot of problem, Larry, after all. I don't know. It's not just about the Charlie Kirk situation. Israel has a lot of problem with young people in the United States. They cannot convince these people that what Israel is doing is right.
Yeah.
And they cannot gain the support of these people by simply replacing Charlie with someone else. I don't see that coming.
Yeah. They're going to try, but we'll see how far down this path Erica, Charlie's widow, goes in supporting that. The generation that's under 40 is not imbued with the Exodus mentality. The movie Exodus with Paul Newman. That was my generation, and that played I think an important role in shaping the public narrative about the support for Israel. Hollywood also played a role in this with the various movies about the what the Germans did to the Jews, and you come away if that's all you're exposed to, then you can come away with this perception. Oh boy, the Arab nations are trying to exterminate the Jews. Well, again, the under 40 crowd. Let's see. Schindler's List was very influential. That came out 30, I want to say 32 years ago, 31 years ago. Well, again, if you were 10 years old at the time or older, you might have some memory of it. But anybody that's 30 and under, zero memory. Because unless they make an effort to go watch it online, they're not going to see it. So that's where the limits of Hollywood propaganda in shaping that narrative have fallen away.
Larry, Donald Trump came out and called Russia a paper tiger, and then he said that he didn't mean it, and he doesn't think the same way. And right now they're talking about Tomahawk missiles with a range of 8,000 miles, which would be 1.6 or 600 kilometers. Do you feel that they're going to send it to Ukraine? And if so, how is that going to change, after all, the situation for Ukrainians or for the West? Here is what J.D. Vance said before going to that.
With them having Tomahawk missiles and the threat that would pose and the possible escalation it would pose, because there was a time when you were very much in favor of, backing away from this situation in terms of our support of Ukraine.
Well, one of the things I've always said, Martha, is I wanted the Europeans to step up in a big way. I wanted us, the United States, to stop shoveling money and weaponry to a conflict that was so far away, when I felt like the Europeans, with all due respect for them, were not actually taking their fair share of the burden. Because of the president's leadership, you now have the Europeans buying weaponry from the United States as opposed to us giving it. And you asked this question about Tomahawks. It's something the president's going to make the final determination on. What the president is going to do is what's in the best interest of the United States of America. That's the driving light between his foreign policy decisions, between his defense policy decisions, and that will be the same heuristic that we apply to how we answer this question about Tomahawks. I'll let the president speak to it, but I know that we're having conversations this very minute about that issue.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, look, the biggest risk of the Tomahawk is the fact that it can be fitted with a nuclear warhead. As far as technology and effectiveness, excuse me, it's old technology, really. I mean, it's not it's not the latest, greatest, and it's not a hypersonic missile by any chance, and it's something that Russia can easily shoot down. So, um, the fact that it's entered the conversation with the United States having very limited options. Look, we've sent them M777 howitzers, the 152 millimeter or 155 millimeter artillery shell. We sent Patriot missiles. We sent ATACMS missiles. They get Javelin. We've thrown just a lot of technology that way, and none of it's made a difference. Russia's been able to, come up with a solution to each one of them. So, if the Tomahawk is deployed and the capability to hit farther, deeper into Russia, then that means this is going to tip the war where Russia is going to hit farther and deeper into Europe and potentially the United States. I mean, it's just, there's no getting around that. So, last I saw, President Trump turned down Zelensky's request. Like, no, we're not sending Tomahawks. So, but that's today. Well, he does more backflips than a gymnast at the Olympics.
Yermak said that Donald Trump has shifted his view of the conflict in Ukraine during the visit he had with in the United Kingdom with King Charles. It seems that King Charles has managed somehow to change Donald Trump's mindset about Ukraine. But the Telegraph reported that.
Yeah.
Do you put any sort of faith in that sort of reports from Telegraph?
No. But look, the only thing that changed in terms of was the words that Donald Trump used with respect to Russia. Very disrespectful, very dismissive. The paper tiger. They have gas shortages. Their military is no good. They're losing the war. That's all rhetoric. What did he actually do? He actually said, "Oh no, hey, listen, Russia and Ukraine, good luck. You two have fun. Sort it out. It's on you guys and the Europeans. Hey, if NATO wants to buy weapons from us," and that you're going, wait a second, you are in NATO. So, the United States is probably the most influential nation in NATO, but Trump's treating it like it's something completely unrelated to the United States. Just a little off topic, but there was a time when I was at State Department working on the anti-terrorism assistance training program. We'd brought a group of Egyptian officers over to the country to train. And instead of going to the training, they were going shopping at Walmart and Costco and all these big stores. And, they weren't following the protocols. And so I had to call, and it was being done under a particular program with USAID. So I called up to the guy who was in charge of this program. Understand, I'm sitting on the second floor of State Department. This guy was up on the 5th floor. We're in the same building. And I told him about this, and he goes, "Oh, well, and it looks like you folks over there at State Department have a problem." And I went, "Over at State?" I said, you're talking to me like you're in some other, universe. You're in the same damn building. So that's what Trump is doing. Sounds to me like you folks over there at NATO have a problem. Hey, Kimosabe, you're in NATO. Don't know if you got the word, but all he's doing is dumping. Yeah, we'll sell NATO whatever we have. Problem is, we don't have a lot. You want some Patriot missiles? Great. We'll put you down 2 years from now. So, the United States doesn't really have a inventory of weapons that it's stacked up. So, man, we got to move this inventory because we got more stuff coming in. It's just the opposite. But in terms of actual action, that's what he's prepared to do. We'll sell to NATO, and then NATO can distribute it. And then if something happens, it's on NATO. NATO's the one that did this. And you saw the immediate or the delayed reaction on the part of whether it's Kaya Kallas or Ruta or even Rimsky-Korsakoff, not really. I mean Sikorsky in Poland. when they first heard the Trump tweet, they were going, "Yay, yay, he's on our side." And then they started reading, and they go, "Oh, wait a second, we got to do this? Oh, no. We're not. We can't be the ones out in front. Come on, we got to figure out how to get the United States involved." So, yeah. So I think this whole thing about, King Charles really persuaded Donald Trump to go hard on Ukraine, nonsense.
Larry, we know what Russia wants, but we don't know what the United States want from the conflict in Ukraine. All we hear from Trump administration is somehow trying to intimidate Russia, trying to say that they're losing, Ukraine is losing more, but Russia is losing as well. But after all, do you know what do they want from the conflict in Ukraine? Here is what J.D. Vance said, Larry.
Is we want peace here. We've been actively pursuing peace from the very beginning of the administration, but the Russians have got to wake up and accept reality here. A lot of people are dying. They don't have a lot to show for it. How many more people are they willing to lose? How many more people are they willing to kill for very little, if any, gain in the military advantage on the ground there? I think the answer is hopefully not that much, but certainly our attitude here is we're going to keep on working for peace. And we hope the Russians actually wake up to the reality on the ground.
Yeah.
Well, you can't blame. It's easy to blame Donald Trump for, spouting nonsense because he doesn't read. What's J.D. Vance's excuse? So this shows to me that the narrative that is dominating within the Trump administration. It is, the CIA's lying. They are painting a picture of what's going on the ground with respect to Russia's military actions. That's just not true. That they're making very little progress. They're moving so slow. We keep hearing that, but they're suffering massive casualties. Except, we talked about this last week. Every time there's an exchange of bodies, that when each side picks up the bodies, the dead soldiers from the battlefield, and Ukraine picks up Russian soldiers, and Russia picks up Ukrainian soldiers, and then they exchange those bodies so they can be buried in their respective countries. The ratio is for every one dead Russian, you got 30 to 40 dead Ukrainians. And that's been the case for the last 9 months. We're now coming to the end of September. It's been the case since January of this year. So don't tell me that Russia's suffering massive losses. Because if anything, there are other independent sources quoting that Russia has actually sustained far fewer casualties compared to previous years. The one who is continuing to suffer grievous losses is Ukraine. But here you got J.D. Vance, who's, he's not an unintelligent person. And he is, he strikes me as someone who does read and should be pretty well informed. But even he's repeating that nonsense. They do not understand that this is not a dispute over territory. And I don't know, is that a deliberate, just they've decided we don't want to understand, we're not going to ask questions, we're going to go with our narrative, or if that's what they've been told. But this is not an argument over territory between Russia and the Ukrainians. This is about the threat that the West, through NATO, using Ukraine as a proxy, poses to Russia. And, Russia's now taken steps to defeat that. And in the process, they will defeat NATO. Or this war is going to expand rapidly. And there are countries, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden, they could all suddenly become embroiled in a war, because several of the NATO countries are now making noises about trying to shut down Russia's ability to go in and out of the Baltic Sea, because they have to pass through a narrow opening, the north of Denmark and south of Norway and Sweden. We'll see if they do that. Russia's not going to sit back and go, "Oh, geez, we lost that access." Russia will view that as an act of war and will act accordingly.
Yeah, part of the problem, Larry, is the mindset of Donald Trump himself, as he sees Ukraine as a business, in my opinion. And when you see, as you mentioned, the case of NATO, he says that these people need us. NATO needs us. We have to give them. They want to buy from us, so we're going to sell the weapons to them. He doesn't see that the United States part of the conflict. They're literally the main, party to the conflict against Russia. And here, what Politico reported, that the Ukraine seeks $90 billion U.S. weapons in a mega deal between the two, and I don't know who's going to pay for that. Is that going to come from natural resources of Ukraine, or Europe going to pay for that? But with these sort of things that are happening, you don't see the end. You don't see any sort of end coming to Ukraine, the conflict in Ukraine.
Well, look, the major culprit in this war, in my view, is the United States. The United States had the opportunity, after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, to be friends with Russia. And part of being a friend is you take steps to help restore their economy that was that completely collapsed with the fall of the Soviet Union. Instead, the United States did the exact opposite. And, we've discussed previously that particularly NATO and U.S. military assistance started working, pretty intently in 1995 in making Ukraine a de facto member of NATO. It wasn't officially brought in, but for all purposes, it was a member, because we had a NATO base at Yavoriv in western Ukraine. Ukraine was participating in U.S. military and NATO exercises, and this participation increased with frequency and intensity over time as time went on. And Rand Corporation and other intelligence documents were produced, establishing the need to use Ukraine as a proxy to destroy Russia and to split Russia away from China and get access to Russia's natural resources. I mean, that's basically the plan. It's the U.S. that's been leading that, not Europe. And so I don't think Trump has backed away from that at all. I don't think maybe even fully understands how this has been part of the deep state effort. But, that's been the plan. So the United States is really the lead in this, not Europe. What Trump is doing by saying it's now Europe's ball it's got them justifiably frightened and horrified because they know they can't do it on their own at all. And the other reality is even if the United States says, okay, we're going to do it, NATO does not have the military power or force to defeat Russia.
But the possibility of false flag operations are still there.
Yeah.
Lavrov was talking about the drones, Larry. Here is what he said about drones.
Are currently taking drones manufactured in Russia, which they also possess, it would seem, and equipping them in such a fashion as to make it very convincing that we launched those drones. But the West, in addition to those that are clamoring and raising hysterics in Poland, the Baltic states, and other places, there in the serious capitals, there are serious people that understand everything full well. However, even in those serious capitals, the elites are committed to the goal of subjugating Russia. They no longer say strategic defeat, they use some other kind of language, but the goal of a strategic defeat remains in their head constantly. They will keep modifying how that defeat should look, but that's exactly what they're doing. I know for a fact that they're helping the Ukrainians with all of these, with all this dirty business. The UK is helping with this, as they have been doing for many centuries in our geopolitical space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's talking about the United Kingdom being part of this dirty game, as he called it.
Excuse me, I had to sneeze.
Yeah.
Well, look, there have been reports out from different sources that Ukrainians they've got their hands on some of the Russian drones that either crashed but were still intact. They've been able to repair them. They're going to equip them, and then they're going to launch attacks on a military base in Poland and in Romania in hopes and then blame it on Russia. Is that a possibility? Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they could do that. And but then you get to the next question is, okay, then what does NATO do? So is NATO, they're going to come together and say, okay, we're going to call all of the armies of Europe and the United States to come together and we're going to invade Russia? Well, they're not. This is not like the fire department where the alarm bell rings and they all slide down the pole and they're on the fire truck heading off to the fire. It takes months to mobilize those different military units and then move them from their home base to a point where they could enter the battle in Ukraine and or go into Russia. Well, if they make that kind of decision, do you think Russia's just going to sit back and say, oh, okay, we'll wait till they're all mobilized and get here? No. At that point, the character of the war will change dramatically. Those assembly points will be destroyed. They can be visited by Mr. Oreshnik or Mr. Iskander or Mr. Kinshal. So Russia would have some options to that. So, or are they going to fly planes? They're going to put combat aircraft, F-35s and such, into Ukrainian airspace to try to attack Russian positions? Again, Russia has a very robust air defense system, as well as its fifth generation fighters. That my understanding is that they have a farther capability. They have a capability where they can identify enemy aircraft. Russian aircraft can identify NATO aircraft and destroy it at a greater distance than NATO aircraft could do to Russian aircraft. So, all this about, NATO's going to get involved. It's just, I step back and say, okay, practically tell me what's going to happen. Oh, well, they can introduce some wonder weapons. Like the only one that hasn't been introduced with any, substance is the Taurus missile out of Germany, or maybe the Tomahawk we talked about earlier. we've had game changer after game changer allegedly. You know, Scott Ritter and I had a brief debate about this in the summer of 2022. When he described the M777 as a game changer, I said it wasn't. I think subsequent events have proven me right on that. But the West has thrown one weapon system after another, and it has not made a difference on the battlefield in terms of stopping the Russians, pushing the Russians back, and enabling Ukraine to advance. So this war, the reason we're hearing all of this desperate, I call it desperate rhetoric, particularly out of the Europeans, is they know, man, the end is near. That the Ukrainians are on their last legs, and Russia is, growing in size and in capability as time goes on. They're not diminishing; they're enhancing their capabilities.
Isn't that amazing that Zelensky is still in power in Ukraine?
Yeah. I mean, the guy's been a tool all along, a tool of the West. He's not fighting and advocating for the interests of the people of Ukraine. He's a captive of some deeper, darker forces.
Yeah. Russia was thinking that Donald Trump could somehow, many people in Russia, those people in power specifically, in the media mostly, they thought that Donald Trump would bring huge changes to the policies of the United States. And it seems that those hopes are fading away from the mindset of.
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm not sure. Because we got to imagine we hear what Donald Trump says, which suggests, oh man, that's going to anger the Russians, and then we listen to Dmitriev and Ushakov, two sort of they're close to Putin, and they're sort of like, nah, that's just talk. We're basically intimating we're hearing other things behind the scenes, So there are other discussions going on. Now that said, you're correct that. Popular opinion in Russia is that there's a lot of people think Putin's being too soft, going too easy on the United States. They want to see a much tougher, more militarized response. So Putin's dealing with that dynamic at home, but if the West had any lingering doubts that they thought, all we got to do is create some domestic turmoil for Putin, and the people will come out and oppose the war, and Russia will stop. It's doing just the opposite. And the West, with you have been using Ukraine to try to attack some of the oil refineries in Russia, and it has created fuel shortages in about 5 of the republics. But the rest of Russia is untouched. And I just saw a report from a guy on the ground over there within the last 24 hours that, he traveled place to place. There is a fuel shortage in Crimea, but Russia's addressing it, and they're not sitting back idle. They keep, every week we keep hearing, oh man, Russia launched the most massive drone and missile strike of the entire war. That was this week, but you said the same last week. And you said the same the week before that. And the week before. So Russia continues to ramp up, expand, and intensify with its strikes.
I think when it comes to the United States and the Russian view on Donald Trump and his administration, recently, I don't know if you saw, Lavrov was talking about it and how they can cooperate or somehow consider the United States as a partner. He's just changed the whole thing. He's one of the sanest, in my opinion, voices in Russia, and he just says the way it is. It doesn't wrap it up in something beautiful. And here is what he said, Larry.
When our interests coincide and there are not many cases in relations between Russia and the U.S. However, when such interests do coincide, it would be stupid not to use this in order to implement some mutually beneficial projects, be that in space or economy or any other sphere. The majority of cases when U.S. and Russian interests do not coincide, the most important thing is not to let it result in confrontation or collision, especially a hot confrontation. And we're united in this position. In diplomacy, as you know, primarily in public diplomacy, a lot of things can be spoken out loud, considering the specifics of the moment. And there are plenty of moments, and sometimes the circumstances change, so we don't see that the U.S. is withdrawing from the policy of holding open, frank dialogue with the Russian Federation, as well as with China and a number of other countries, that the United States are having differences of opinion and contradictions and different vision of the way they should trade further and conduct economic deals.
Yeah, we cannot explain it better than what he just said. And but you don't see the same in the United States. You don't see this Rubio coming out and arguing the same way.
Yeah, well, it is the Trump administration is it's all a show. I'm not sure it's well written. It's certainly not well directed. It is contradictory, but you get certain expressions from Marco Rubio, for example, as both Secretary of State and the National Security Advisor, all in one, all wrapped up in one. But then, they went, he met with Lavrov at the UN this last week. And when Lavrov came out of the meeting, how was the meeting, Mr. Secretary? And he got thumbs up. He didn't use any other finger to describe the meeting, but the one finger or the two finger, the rock star look. So, I think Russia still is a little bit frustrated that there has not been movement on things such as reopening direct flights between the United States and Russia, returning the property that the United States illegally confiscated under Barack Obama in the closing days of his presidency in December of 2016. So, there's still issues to be sorted out, but they are talking. And the way I would monitor it is to, look at people like Dmitriev and Ushakov. If they come out and start saying, those effing Americans, they are a pain in, they say, okay, now we got problems. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying, that Trump, he says crazy stuff, they shrug that off. So that tells me there is something going on behind the scenes that we're not privy to.
Larry, Iranian president in the United States, he had interviews with the right, left, and all these different outlets in the United States. And here is what he said on Fox News.
No place for nuclear weapons or any type of weapons of mass destruction. The unfounded accusations that they're blowing out of proportion is unacceptable. We've never sought nuclear weapons. We never will seek nuclear weapons. But if Mr. Trump if his scope is for us not to have any nuclear weapons, that was easily obtainable. There was never any tangible proof that we were seeking nuclear weapons. Therefore, they use that as an excuse to carry out an attack that they should not have.
Yeah, he's simply saying that if the main goal is nuclear weapons, we're not going to make nukes. Then let's negotiate, let's talk.
Yeah.
And Larry, do you see the possibility of a war with Iran again?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's highly likely to happen. And, could there be a silver lining out of it? You hate to try to say, is there anything positive that can come from needless bloodshed and loss? Um, it could end up just completely disabling Israel's ability to continue the war in Gaza and the war against the Palestinians. So from that standpoint, that would be one bright, the silver lining in an otherwise dark cloud. But no, the West is intent upon a confrontation. They continue to paint Iran as the major culprit for all the unrest in the region. Yet the one country that has killed more people and continues to kill people and attack other countries and to engage in terrorism across the region, that's Israel. It's not Iran, it's Israel. And yet the Western narrative is, that's Iran. Iran is doing all those things when, all you have to do is just sit and read the news every day. It's not Iranian planes bombing in Lebanon, bombing in Syria, bombing in Yemen. Those are Israeli planes. And bombing in the West Bank and bombing in Gaza. The thing is, now we're entering the third week of Israel's renewed offensive to take Gaza City. Think about that. They've got all the military advantage. They've been unable to secure it. And the Qassam brigades and others continue to fight heroically and are inflicting some significant losses on the Israelis. So, I think I don't see how this does not end in a broader war. Clearly King of Jordan is anticipating it because he came out of that last, the summit from 2 weeks ago saying, hey, we're going to reintroduce conscription because we got to build up our army. Well, you don't build up your army if you think you're going to be having peace in the future. You do it just the opposite. You build it up because you think war is coming. Egypt, similarly, the more confrontations with Israel, not less.
I think if this time they attack Iran, they're gonna face a total different situation with Iran because they're totally prepared. They know the war is coming, and the response from Iran would be different. And these guys, these two countries, Iran and Israel has experienced the war against Iran, and Iran knows a lot about Israel as well. That would hugely change the nature of the conflict. That is dangerous, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, what we've also seen is that Russia and China have stepped up their military assistance to Iran, and that Iran has been willing to accept such assistance. That's number one. Number two, we've seen that the Europeans have aligned themselves strongly with both Israel and the United States in pushing the whole, what they call the snapback, the reimposition of sanctions that actually were never lifted. Okay, when the JCPOA was signed in 2015, there were a whole host of existing sanctions in place that were supposed to go away, and put Iran back in a place where it could do normal economic activity. Instead, that never happened. The United States withdrew, and Germany, France, and the UK never actually implemented the JCPOA. So now they had that meeting last week at the UN. They had the vote, and Russia and China were pressing for, hey, let's continue with the JCPOA with sanctions relief for Iran, at least on paper, that stays in place. Europeans with the United States said, hell no, snap back. And Iran made it clear, okay, if you're going to go back to the sanctions, which you've never lifted in the first place, so if you're going to continue doing that, we're kicking the IAEA out. We're not going to be part of the Non-Proliferation Treaty anymore. We'll walk away from that because our efforts to cooperate in that and to pursue it diplomatically have led to nothing but you keep punishing us. So why should we be part of it? So what's the incentive? And so this is this is again a Western generated confrontation, and the West is, I think, going to use that as justification to attack Iran. The problem for Trump is he can't figure out who he wants to attack first, Venezuela or Iran. And there is, Venezuela and Iran have had good relations. And Iran has, I think, provided some military technology to Venezuela. In addition, the Russians are very involved in the oil industry in Venezuela. I read something. I haven't verified if it's true, but if it's true that the Russians have a majority ownership in Orinoco oil fields. So, the U.S. creating a pretext to attack Venezuela could be related to subsequent attacks on Iran.
Oh. Larry, Europe during the conflict in Ukraine has decided to go with this sort of endless hatred toward Russia, which somehow Europe right now, in the mind of Russians, they don't care that much about Europe.
Right.
The same thing is happening, Larry, in Iran. And they don't anymore care about what Europe is talking about, what is in the process of happening, what has happened between Europe and Russia. And the same thing gonna go with China, in my opinion, in the near future. And Europe is somehow isolating itself. And as you mentioned, Donald Trump, when he's talking about NATO, he's talking about Europeans. He's not talking about the United States. Everybody sees Europe as a different entity, and that they don't want to negotiate. They don't have any sort of leverage in terms of international relationship between what's going on, the ties, and even with the situation in Gaza, you don't see that much influence coming from Europe. Somehow they're losing their relevance.
Well, and I've made this point before, but it's worth repeating, that countries like India, Russia, and China actually they have potential leverage and great influence over Israel. I think there's actually more that they can and should do to stop this genocide. They're not doing it for whatever reason. I don't know if it's economic or they have some broader strategic purpose. Europe is desperate to hang on to its colonial legacy, and that colonial legacy is dying. We've been seeing it stripped away piece by piece. Over the last 2 years, with the French being expelled from the Sahel in Africa is another example. And so you got more and more countries standing up, like saying, we're mad as hell, we're not going to take it anymore. And they are moving more into the camps of working with Russia and China. So the bottom line is that the world is changing. We're seeing the birth of a new world order, one that's not based in the globalist, the economic forum, the Zurich Economic Forum, the George Soros visions for the world. We're seeing something different that is, while the Russia and China call it multipolar, and have for a while, it's a multinodal world. It's a world in which there's no one center that calls all the shots. Instead, it's diffuse, diverse, and cooperative. At least that's what we hear coming out of Russia and China, and now India, with respect to how the BRICS vision is supposed to work.
Yeah. Larry, before wrapping up, here is what UN relief official Tom Fletcher said on CNN about the situation with starvation in Gaza.
Dying of starvation, effectively their bodies consuming their own organs, what we give them to try and avoid that is this kind of high-protein peanut butter
Yes,
paste.
I know what it is.
And we've been told we can't bring peanut butter in because it's a luxury, because Hamas might try to steal the peanut butter. So we are on the border every day arguing. Seriously, we are fighting to get our convoys through. We're getting a little bit more in now, but it is still a drop in the ocean. And what we're seeing in Gaza City is utterly horrendous. And again, people who've been displaced time and time again, the lucky people are the ones living under tents. The lucky people are the people who can escape, but we're there. We will stay and deliver. We've got our colleagues remaining in Gaza City to save as many lives as we can and to bear witness and testimony to what we see.
I'm literally trying to process the.
Yeah, it's. I don't know how long they can blame everything on Hamas, and that doesn't.
Well, again, the narrative that Hamas is a terrorist organization. I maintain Hamas is not a terrorist organization. Hamas is an Islamic political movement that is very much keen on liberating, freeing the Palestinian people from the oppression of the Zionists. You know, this war has been going on for 75 plus years. Not with Hamas, but you know we can't ignore the fact that Hamas was in part. It did not originate with Israeli intelligence, but once it came into existence, it was certainly funded and supported by Israeli intelligence, who saw a way to use it to destroy the Palestinian Authority or prevent a two-state solution. But prevent an independent Palestinian nation. And, you know, the good thing about this last week at the UN, at least Bibi Netanyahu finally came clean that under no circumstances will he allow a Palestinian state. So that's where we're at. This is going to, there's going to be either a Palestinian state or an Israeli state. There's not going to be one or both. One of them is going to be eliminated. And right now, it looks that Israel's well on its way to doing that to the Palestinians, but the Palestinians are not giving up. That's what's fascinating, their courage and tenacity. But I draw the parallel that Mohammed al-Jalani, now Abu Ibrahim al-Shara, whatever his new name is, or his original birth name, when he headed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, he carried out more terrorist attacks, and the people that he was over, that he led, carried out more terrorist attacks, killed more civilians in a 2-year period than Hamas did, was alleged to have done, over a 25-year period. And yet, the United States has no problem with giving the hugs out to Ashara, letting him clean up, dress up, come to the United States. We won't let the Palestinians in, but by God, we'll let a bona fide Sunni terrorist into the United States, a guy that's been involved with chopping heads off of people, killing children, killing Christians, killing Shia, killing Alawites, and we let him in the country? It's just, this is beyond absurd. It's obscene.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Larry, for being with us today.
Ok, bom dia.
Bom dia.
Hoje dia tá lindo.
Tão lindo.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk
Obrigado.
to you later. Muito obrigado.
Gracias.
Yeah. We'll see you later this week.
See you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.